The massive crystal chamber hummed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered around the central platform. Ambassador HFY stood before the assembled crowd, his blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. He pressed a button and a hologram appeared above them, showing a small blue and green planet spinning slowly in space. "Friends and colleagues," HFY began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "we have a problem that nobody wants to talk about." The planet in the hologram looked peaceful and quiet. White clouds drifted over blue oceans and green continents. It seemed like any other world, except for one strange fact that had been puzzling the galaxy's greatest minds for 200 years. "This is Sol 3, which the inhabitants call Earth," HFY continued. "Our sensors show it has almost no defenses. No energy shields protecting the planet. No massive space stations with powerful weapons. No fleets of warships patrolling the area. Their biggest weapons appear to be simple explosive missiles that use old chemical technology." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared at the floor or studied their claws with unusual interest. General Croth, a massive warrior with scars covering his green skin, crossed his arms. He had conquered dozens of worlds for his people, the Krillians. His species was known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest fighters alive. But even he seemed uncomfortable. Merchant Prince Vextar, whose people the Nexari controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes, examined his sharp claws carefully. His golden eyes darted around the room, looking anywhere except at the hologram of Earth. In the corner sat Sage Mordun, an ancient being whose people the Etherians had explored space for thousands of years before most other species had even discovered fire. Her translucent form flickered slightly, and something that might have been amusement crossed her face. "The question that brings us here today," HFY said, "is simple but troubling. If Earth appears so defenseless, why has no one tried to conquer it?" The chamber fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. HFY pulled up more data. "Look at these numbers. Earth has valuable resources. Plenty of water, useful metals, and billions of inhabitants who could serve as workers. It should be the perfect target for any expanding empire." He gestured to the crowd. "The Krillians have conquered 300 worlds. The Nexari have established trade dominance over entire star systems. The hegemony controls 50 sectors of space. All of these civilizations have the military power to overwhelm Earth's primitive defenses within days." More uncomfortable shifting. General Krotha's jaw muscles tensed. Prince Vextar's tail twitched nervously. "Yet Earth remains untouched," HFY continued. "In the 2 centuries since we first made contact with humanity, not a single species has attempted conquest. Not one military campaign has been launched. Not even a small raid for resources." A young delegate from the Centaurian Republic, a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, raised one of his tentacles. "Ambassador HFY, perhaps we should send a research fleet to investigate? Surely understanding this mystery would benefit everyone?" The suggestion hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then several of the older, more experienced delegates exchanged meaningful looks. The kind of looks that said volumes without speaking a word. The young Centaurian, noticing the sudden tension in the room, quickly lowered his tentacle. "Or perhaps that would not be wise? The matter requires further study," HFY said diplomatically, though his voice carried an odd strain. "Much further study." General Croth stood up slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow over nearby delegates. "The Krillian Empire agrees that this matter needs careful consideration." Prince Vextar nodded quickly. "The Nexari Trade Federation supports a cautious approach to the Earth question." Even more strange was what happened next. Sage Mordun, who rarely spoke at council meetings anymore, actually chuckled softly. It was a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but somehow it made everyone in the room even more nervous. "Wisdom often comes from knowing which questions not to ask," the ancient being said cryptically. The young Centaurian delegate looked around the room with growing confusion. These were the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. They had fleets that could destroy entire solar systems. They had weapons that could crack planets in half. They had conquered thousands of worlds between them. So why were they all acting afraid of one small, apparently defenseless planet? "I don't understand," the young delegate said. "Are you telling me that the entire galactic community is afraid of humans? But they don't even have proper space weapons." The silence that followed was even deeper than before. Some delegates actually looked away as if ashamed. "Session adjourned," HFY announced quickly. "We will reconvene when new information becomes available." As the delegates filed out of the chamber, conversations broke out in hushed whispers. But everyone carefully avoided talking about Earth directly. It was as if there was some unspoken agreement that certain topics were better left undiscussed. The young Centaurian watched the older species leave, their behavior growing stranger by the minute. Warriors who had never shown fear suddenly seemed nervous. Merchants who calculated risk for a living appeared worried about something they would not name. And in the corner, the ancient sage Mordun continued to flicker with what definitely looked like amusement, as if she knew a joke that everyone else was desperately trying to forget. As the chamber emptied, the hologram of Earth continued spinning peacefully, a small blue world that somehow held secrets powerful enough to make the galaxy's greatest civilizations choose to look the other way. The trading post on Nexar Prime buzzed with activity as hundreds of young merchants filled the great hall. Captain Velix stood at the front, his old scales faded from decades of space travel. The veteran trader's eyes still held the sharp look of someone who had survived the galaxy's most dangerous trade routes. "Now younglings," Velix said, activating a large star map that filled the room with soft blue light, "let me show you the safe and profitable routes through the outer systems." The map displayed thousands of stars connected by glowing trade lanes. Green lines showed safe routes with good profits. Yellow lines marked dangerous but potentially rewarding paths. Red lines indicated areas where merchants traveled at their own risk. A young Nexari near the front pointed excitedly at a bright yellow star. "Captain Velix, why is that sol system marked in black?" "The preliminary surveys show rich mineral deposits and a huge population. That should be a gold mine for traders." Several other young merchants murmured agreement. Black markings on trade charts meant areas that were completely off-limits. Usually these were war zones or systems controlled by hostile species. Velix's expression grew dark. His tail stopped swishing and his golden eyes became serious. "Ah, you want to know about Sol 3. About Earth." He paused for a long moment. "Very well. Let me tell you the story of the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge, and why we don't trade there anymore." The hall became quiet. Even the youngest traders knew that when Captain Velix told a story, it was worth listening to. 20 cycles ago, Velix began, Captain Morlex commanded the Prophet's Edge, one of our fastest and best cargo ships. The humans had just started communicating with other worlds, and the profit potential looked incredible. A whole planet full of customers who had never seen galactic technology. He gestured to the star map. Captain Morlex approached Earth broadcasting the standard peaceful trade messages. The humans responded immediately with huge enthusiasm. They were excited, friendly, and eager to establish trade relationships. "That sounds wonderful," interrupted one young trader. "It did indeed," Velix continued, but his voice carried a warning tone. The humans invited the Prophet's Edge to land at one of their space facilities. They rolled out what they called the red carpet treatment. Cultural exchanges, diplomatic dinners, tours of their cities. Captain Morlex thought he had discovered the perfect trading partners. Velix walked closer to his audience. The humans seemed delightful. Curious about everything, asking thousands of questions about galactic civilization. They wanted to know about other species, about technology, about trade customs. Captain Morlex was already calculating the enormous profits from this new relationship. The old merchant's voice dropped lower. Then, during a formal diplomatic dinner, one of the human delegates mentioned something casually. Just part of normal conversation. He said they were sorry for any delays in setting up trade agreements, but there was a small disagreement happening on the other side of their planet. Several young traders leaned forward. Captain Morlex, being a thorough businessman, asked politely about this disagreement. "Perhaps we could sell medical supplies, construction materials, or communication equipment to help resolve it. Always thinking about profit opportunities, you understand." Velix paused, letting the tension build. The human diplomat smiled and began explaining their little local problem. He mentioned that currently about 12 million soldiers were actively fighting across 4 different continents. Gasps echoed through the hall. 12 million soldiers, Velix repeated. The diplomat described weapons that could completely destroy cities in minutes. He talked about supply chains that kept millions of fighters fed, armed, and equipped continuously. He mentioned industrial facilities dedicated entirely to producing war materials that exceeded the total manufacturing capacity of most galactic civilizations. One young merchant's voice cracked as he asked, "A major galactic war?" "No," Velix said quietly. The human called it a regional dispute. He seemed mildly annoyed that it was disrupting their farming and manufacturing schedules. The diplomat actually apologized to Captain Morlex for the inconvenience and assured him that the disagreement would probably be resolved within a few years. The hall was completely silent now. Then, Velix continued, the human said something that made Captain Morlex's blood run cold. He said that once this minor regional issue was settled, humanity could focus on more important matters, like establishing proper trade relationships and learning about potential threats in the galaxy. Velix turned off the star map, plunging the room into normal lighting. Captain Morlex excused himself politely, returned to the Prophet's Edge, and departed Earth that same day. He filed a report that led to Sol 3 being classified as economically non-viable by Nexari High Command. But Captain, protested one trader, surely they were exaggerating? Velix shook his head slowly. Our long-range sensors confirmed everything. The scale of their conflict, the industrial capacity, the logistics networks. All of it was real. And the humans genuinely seemed to consider it a minor inconvenience. He looked around the room at the young faces. The truly terrifying part was not their military capacity. It was their attitude. They discussed warfare involving millions of combatants the same way we might discuss a shipping delay. It was just another problem to solve efficiently. We've maintained the black classification for Sol 3 ever since, Velix concluded. Some prophets' younglings simply aren't worth pursuing. When a species treats galactic-scale warfare as a minor regional disagreement, perhaps it's better to find customers elsewhere. As the young merchants filed out, they carried with them a new understanding of why some systems remained forever off-limits on their trade charts. Deep inside the fortress world of Castar, General Thakmor sat in a room that officially did not exist. The walls displayed banners from 1,000 conquered worlds, each one representing another victory for the Krillian Empire. His most trusted officers surrounded the table, veterans who had fought beside him in battles across the galaxy. Brothers, General Thakmor began, his scarred face serious in the dim light, what I tell you today must never leave this room. Our reputation as the galaxy's finest warriors depends on complete secrecy. Colonel Vashti, hero of the Altarian conquest, straightened in his chair. General, does this concern the human world that everyone whispers about but no one discusses? Thakmor nodded slowly. For 30 years we have been watching Sol 3 in secret. Special surveillance teams, hidden observation posts, intercepted communications. What we have learned has led to a permanent order that Earth remains completely off-limits to all Krillian military operations. The officers exchanged confused glances. The Krillians had never backed down from any fight. They were known throughout the galaxy as the species that conquered first and asked questions later. General, Major Klektun said carefully, surely no single world could threaten the entire Krillian fleet? Thakmor activated a holographic display. Watch carefully. This is what humans call a special forces operation. The projection showed human soldiers moving through a dangerous area with precision that impressed even these battle-hardened warriors. The humans coordinated perfectly, used their equipment with deadly efficiency, and demonstrated tactics that would have made Krillian elite units proud. Impressive, admitted Colonel Vashti, but we have seen skilled soldiers before. This is their peacetime military, Thakmor said quietly. Maintained between conflicts. These soldiers are not fighting a war. They are simply training. More footage appeared. Humans moving through destroyed cities with systematic efficiency that spoke of extensive experience. Their weapons were sophisticated, their movements flawless, their supply lines impressively organized. General, whispered Major Klektun, their logistics systems, they're supplying operations across entire continents simultaneously. That requires massive coordination. Indeed, Thakmor agreed. And this is what they consider a minor deployment. But logistics are not what convinced our high command to avoid Earth entirely. He brought up new recordings. This is from a human military academy graduation ceremony. Listen carefully to what they say. The Krillian officers heard human leaders speaking to fresh graduates about concepts that made their warrior hearts race with excitement and terror. The humans discussed war theory like scientists studying natural laws. They analyzed historical battles with the thoroughness of engineers designing machines. They spoke of strategic planning as if conflict was not chaos to be survived, but a science to be mastered. They don't just fight wars, Thakmor said slowly. They have turned warfare itself into a systematic discipline. They study it, improve it, and perfect it constantly. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. But General, Colonel Vashti said, they claim to be a peaceful species. Their diplomatic messages always emphasize cooperation and friendship. That, Thakmor replied, is what makes them truly dangerous. They have weaponized warfare while genuinely believing themselves to be peace-loving people. He showed them more footage. Human children learning about historical battles in school. Human civilians discussing military strategy as casually as weather. Human entertainment that featured complex tactical scenarios presented as amusing games. War is woven into their culture so deeply that they don't even recognize it anymore, the general explained. They have made the study of conflict as natural as breathing. Every human child learns about logistics, strategy, and tactical thinking without even realizing it. Major Kleckton stared at the recordings in amazement. They're preparing their entire population for warfare without calling it military training. Exactly, Thakmor confirmed. But here is the most disturbing part. Our intelligence reports indicate that humans consider their current global situation to be an unusually peaceful time in their history. The officers looked at each other with growing unease. Their current peaceful period includes maintaining millions of professional soldiers, weapons that can destroy entire cities, and industrial capacity dedicated to military production that exceeds most galactic civilizations' total manufacturing output, the general continued. He brought up the final set of data. According to our analysts, this represents perhaps 5% of humanity's potential military capacity if they were actually fighting a serious war. The silence that followed was profound. General, Colonel Vashti asked quietly, are you saying that what we observed is not humans at war but humans at peace? I am saying that humans have made peace and war indistinguishable, Thakmor replied. They maintain wartime capabilities during peacetime. They treat military excellence as a normal part of civilized life. They have created a society where being prepared for galactic-scale conflict is considered basic common sense. He turned off the holographic display. The humans continue to seem friendly and approachable in all official communications. They invite cultural exchanges and express genuine interest in galactic cooperation. This makes them either the galaxy's greatest actors, or something far more dangerous. What could be more dangerous than great actors? Asked Major Kleckton. A species that has genuinely convinced itself it is peaceful while building the most sophisticated military culture the galaxy has ever seen, Thakmor answered. They are not pretending to be harmless. They actually believe they are harmless, even while being more dangerous than anything we have encountered. The meeting ended with a sobering realization. For the first time in Krillian history, they had found a species they truly did not want to fight. The Etherian meditation chambers rarely received visitors. The ancient crystalline halls had been silent for decades, with Sage Mordun spending her time in deep contemplation. But today was different. Today she had broken her century-long silence to address the most senior members of the Galactic Council. The chamber filled with soft, pulsing light as representatives from the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations gathered. These were not the eager young diplomats from the public council meetings. These were the beings who made real decisions, who held real power, who knew real secrets. Sage Mordun's translucent form flickered as she materialized before them. Her ancient voice carried the weight of countless centuries and civilizations that had risen and fallen before most species had discovered fire. You wonder about Earth, she began, her words seeming to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. You see their apparent weakness and cannot understand why the galaxy's predators circle but never strike. You ask yourselves why beings who conquer worlds avoid one small planet. Allow me to share what the Etherians learned long ago. Ambassador ZYX Tal leaned forward. Sage, we would be honored to hear your wisdom. The Etherians were the first to encounter humanity, Mordun continued. This was during their early space exploration phase, when they had barely managed to build primitive stations around their homeworld. We expected to find another young species overwhelmed by their first contact with galactic civilization. Her form solidified slightly as she accessed memories from centuries past. Our exploratory vessel approached their small space station, broadcasting standard greeting protocols. We prepared to meet beings who would be awed by our technology, frightened by the vast galaxy they had just discovered, or perhaps eager to submit to our guidance. General Croth shifted in his seat. That sounds like typical first contact procedure. Indeed, Mordun agreed. But the human response was unlike anything in our records. They showed no fear, no overwhelming wonder, no desire to submit or worship us as gods. Instead, they began asking questions. She paused, letting the words sink in. Not the questions you might expect from a primitive species meeting advanced beings. They did not ask about our culture, our art, or our philosophy. Within the first hour of contact, they had inquired about our propulsion systems, energy sources, communication methods, and defensive capabilities. Prince Vextar's golden eyes widened. They were gathering technical intelligence? More than that, Mordun replied. They were gathering strategic intelligence. By the end of our first week of contact, they had somehow deduced the existence of faster-than-light travel, interstellar communications, energy weapons, and defensive shields. Not because we told them, but because they asked the right questions and analyzed our answers. The sage's voice took on a note of something that might have been admiration mixed with concern. Then they surprised us even more. They presented us with preliminary plans for what they called joint defense initiatives against potential galactic threats. Threats they had never imagined before meeting you, observed Ambassador Zuextal. Exactly. They had somehow anticipated the existence of hostile civilizations, resource conflicts, and territorial disputes on a galactic scale. They assumed that meeting one peaceful species meant there must be others who were not peaceful. Mordun's form began to fade slightly, as if the effort of remembering was taxing. But that was not the most disturbing part. Within one human generation, not a galactic generation, but their short lifespan generation, they had accomplished something unprecedented. The chamber fell completely silent. They had not only replicated several of our technologies, but they had begun proposing improvements. They established defensive protocols for their entire star system. They created contingency plans for dozens of theoretical invasion scenarios. They developed counter-strategies for weapon systems they had never seen. And somehow they managed to make it all seem like eager scientific cooperation. General Krotha's voice was barely a whisper. They reverse-engineered your technology in one generation? They did more than that, Mordun replied. They anticipated our technology. By studying our ship's basic systems, they deduced the existence of weapons and defenses we had not even mentioned. Then they began preparing countermeasures. The ancient being's next words chilled everyone present. We realized that humans don't simply defend themselves against threats. They systematically identify every possible danger, analyze it from every conceivable angle, develop comprehensive countermeasures, then create backup plans for their backup plans. Prince Vextar's tail twitched nervously. Surely their lack of advanced weapons indicates some limitations? Does it? Mordun asked quietly. Or does it indicate something far more sophisticated? Perhaps they have calculated that appearing vulnerable serves their strategic interests better than revealing their true capabilities. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Consider this, the sage continued. When we made first contact with humanity, they immediately began planning for galactic-scale conflicts they had never imagined. They prepared for threats they had never encountered. They developed strategies for scenarios that existed only in theory. Does this sound like a species that would leave itself genuinely defenseless? The chamber was so quiet that the soft humming of the crystalline walls became audible. The Etherians withdrew from Earth not because humans were hostile, Mordun explained. We withdrew because they made us realize something terrifying about ourselves. In all our centuries of galactic exploration, we had never encountered a species that turned first contact into a strategic advantage. Her final words hung in the air like a death sentence. Humanity doesn't remain defenseless because they cannot build galactic standard weapons. They remain defenseless because appearing weak while preparing for every possible threat is the most effective defense of all. As Sage Mordun faded from view, the delegates were left with a deeply unsettling realization about the small blue world that everyone avoided but no one could explain why. Admiral Zektor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green world of Earth grow larger on the main screen. Behind him stretched a fleet of 200 warships from 7 different civilizations. They called themselves the Coalition of Young Powers, and they were tired of listening to the older species talk about caution and patience. The ancient civilizations have grown soft, Zektor had declared at their secret meeting. They see danger where none exists. Earth is defenseless and we will prove it. His tactical officer looked up from her console. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Audio and visual. Put it on screen, Zektor commanded. A middle-aged human woman appeared on the view screen. She wore simple blue clothing and smiled warmly at the camera. Her brown hair was tied back neatly, and she looked like someone you might meet at a peaceful diplomatic gathering. Greetings, visitors, she said cheerfully. I'm Ambassador Rebecca Walsh, representing Earth's United Nations. We're always delighted to meet new civilizations. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions so we can arrange proper diplomatic protocols. Admiral Zektor laughed loudly. Diplomatic protocols? We are here to claim your world for the Coalition of Young Powers. Surrender now and your species will be treated fairly as our subjects. The human woman's expression did not change. Her smile remained friendly and professional. Oh my. Well, that is quite unfortunate. Please hold on just a moment while I connect you with our Defense Coordination Center. The screen flickered briefly, then a new voice came through the speakers. It was calm, professional, and completely unworried. Admiral Zektor, this is General James Morrison, Terra Defense Command. We appreciate you taking the time to announce your intentions clearly. That's very courteous of you. Zektor felt his first twinge of unease. The human general sounded like he was discussing weather, not an invasion threat. General Morrison, Zektor replied, trying to sound more intimidating, you have exactly 30 minutes to begin evacuation procedures before we commence orbital bombardment of your major cities. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral, General Morrison replied politely. You see, you've already entered our defensive perimeter, and frankly, we're a bit concerned about your fleet's structural integrity. What are you talking about? Zektor demanded. Our scans show no defensive satellites, no weapons platforms, no orbital fortresses. Your planet appears completely undefended. Oh, we don't really go in for those traditional approaches, the general said pleasantly. They're so obvious and expensive. Tell me, Admiral, how are your navigation systems performing right now? For the first time, Admiral Zektor felt genuine concern. His navigation officer had been reporting minor glitches for the past hour. Nothing serious, just small errors that required constant corrections. Explain yourself, human, Zektor demanded. Well, it's the strangest thing, General Morrison continued conversationally. Our space debris cleanup systems have been reporting unusual metallic objects throughout the local area. We use self-replicating nanomachines, you understand. Tiny little robots designed to break down space junk that might threaten our civilian spacecraft traffic. Alarms began sounding throughout the Coalition fleet as hull breach warnings appeared on multiple ships. Terribly efficient at molecular disassembly, I'm afraid, the general added. They seem to have taken a particular interest in your hull plating, probably detecting it as foreign debris that needs cleaning up. Zektor watched in growing horror as red warning lights flashed across his command center. How is this possible? Don't worry though, General Morrison said cheerfully. We're also getting some interesting readings from our quantum communication network. It's designed to monitor all local space traffic for asteroid collision predictions. Safety first, you understand. The artificial intelligence systems that manage the network have been noting some concerning structural instabilities developing in your ships. Admiral Zektor's weapons systems suddenly required constant recalibration. His engines developed mysterious power fluctuations. His communications array started receiving signals from sources that should not exist. Our AI systems were originally designed for resource distribution optimization, the general explained helpfully. Making sure every human gets what they need when they need it. Quite remarkable how adaptable they've become. They've taken quite an interest in your fleet composition, Admiral. Very thorough, our artificial intelligences. They're already calculating optimal resource redistribution patterns for your ship's raw materials. The Coalition fleet's neat formation began falling apart as individual ships experienced cascading system failures. What had appeared to be empty space around Earth was revealing itself to be full of invisible threats. Admiral, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the entire system. They're not coming from weapons platforms. They're integrated into the asteroids, the orbital debris, even the solar radiation patterns. The entire system is a trap, Admiral Zektor finished quietly, understanding flooding through him. Not a trap, Admiral, General Morrison corrected gently. A home. We just happen to have made it a very well-defended one. You're certainly welcome to stay for diplomatic talks, but I'm afraid your ships aren't quite up to our current safety standards. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable conducting negotiations from outside the system perimeter. As the Coalition fleet limped away from Earth, nursing damaged ships and wounded pride, Admiral Zektor stared at the small blue world growing distant behind them. Earth was not defenseless. It was a defensive system so sophisticated that it did not need to announce itself with traditional weapons. The final message from Earth followed them to the edge of the system. Thank you for visiting and please give our regards to the Galactic Council. Your unscheduled arrival helped us test some new asteroid tracking protocols. Most educational. Admiral Zektor finally understood why the galaxy's greatest civilizations avoided one apparently harmless planet. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into the most sophisticated trap anyone had ever built, and they had done it while genuinely believing themselves to be peaceful neighbors welcoming friends to the galaxy.